This is a really interesting topic, not just because it's really interesting in our world, but because it goes back to the very beginning of what was STC. We're STC and CISO now. We're well into the second year of being a merged business. So we're developing as much software as we are people these days. But the STC bit many years ago in the late 90s and early 2000s used to stand for Scottish Training Consultants, and I suppose its transition from being a kind of public course kind of provider where we did lots of off-the-shelf training to be doing more of what we're doing just now came in the early 2000s when we began to explore what was different about corporate learning than necessarily about individual training. And I think that's going to come out quite strongly in the discussion we're going to have today. And it really is something that we've held dear for around 20 years now, around how you fine tune the appropriate tools and knowledge and processes that will enable an organization and its people to learn together in order to kind of get that right outcome. As Craig says, this is the third in a series of I think 10 or 11 webinars that we're running this year. If there's one good thing that's come out of this COVID pandemic, it's been that the virtual technology does enable us to connect on these things much easier. It's maybe not such a good thing when it comes to delivering certainly all types of training and learning, but certainly for these things, it's a great way to connect the world and connect what we're doing. As Craig said, very informal. Stop us as we go. This is very much going to be Craig and I having a conversation for this very kind of relaxed opening bit. But feel free to stop us and put your hand up, and we'll involve you in the conversation as we go. We're going to kick off with a short animation, which is the first technical challenge that we've got, because I'm hoping it's not going to lag on Teams. But a short animation that you might find a little bit controversial in terms of some of your own pasts and some of the development that you've been on. You might challenge it. You might not agree with some of the messaging that's in it, but it's really around not exploring the merits or otherwise of other approaches. That's really not the intention of this, but to try and explain that sweet spot that we're trying to communicate. And then we'll talk about the building blocks and the constituent parts that kind of lead you into that sweet spot. And hopefully we can then have a discussion about an approach and methodology which has been used to deliver training and development and corporate learning in a range of often very challenging environments. And of course, just finally, this particular focus today, as we've said in the title there, is about how you channel an approach and methodology to get the most out of the learning that you offer your high potential employees and people within your network. So how do you best give them the tools, the knowledge, the processes, and the appetite to become your leaders of tomorrow? So that's what we're aiming to kind of get across. I'm going to start with this short animation, and we'll pick up on the questions after that. So all being well, this will work. Oh, sorry. So Okay, hopefully everyone was able to view that. Craig, was it okay at your end?
The images were fine. I think there was a little bit of
lag.
Some of the audio didn't quite come through. I noticed a couple of messages in the chat there, but what I would say on that is the audio was just a little bit of a backdrop of music. There was no narrative as such. So as long as you were able to pick up on the text on the screen, then you will get the gist of the video. But I think for anyone that did have issues, we're more than happy to share the link to that little animation after the webinar as well. So hopefully you at least managed to get the gist of what we're getting at there.
Okay, great, Craig. Well, I think you're gonna pose question one for me, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. As Mark's touched on, folks, we're going to try and keep this informal, and we've set each other a couple of little challenges here to try and tackle and run through that will just spark a little bit of conversation and perhaps a little bit of debate as well. We may not always agree on absolutely everything that we discuss, and that's maybe and you won't either, perhaps, as part of the audience, and so feel free to come in. So, Mark, the first point I wanted to suppose really put your way. And I think with your experience and background in this area as well, it's only fitting. But yeah, when a business makes the decision to invest in a corporate program, how does it really go about selling the benefits to people, which we know is really important?
I think it is a fundamentally important question, and one that's often overlooked with the best intentions. But I think the key word in there is selling. We work in incredibly busy organizations now that have often less people doing more, and we rely on systems and softwares and tools and processes to help pick up the lag often that was previously picked up by having more people. And so the days of getting willing volunteers to come and sit in on long residential development programs, particularly around management and leadership, I have to say, are not what they were. And as a result, the learning itself, as we'll come to, has had to become much more punchy. But the key thing is you've got to really sell it as if you're in a B2C scenario. When someone goes to buy something in the supermarket or something in the electrical store, you're there to sell them the benefits of the product that they're going to buy. And you have to do that with learning as well. People need to get the what's in it for me aspect in order to come and really engage. And that engagement, obviously, we'll talk about as we go through the discussion today, often has to come before the program starts. And so one of the key things around doing this is to make sure that the program, when the intentions have been designed in and the content has been designed in to suit the environment it's going into, it has to be branded and communicated in such a way that people can then see it for what it is. It's natural for a human being to be a little bit cynical sometimes or apprehensive about getting involved in a program that they don't really know what it's for or what it's there to do. So branding it is something that's extremely important, and that's beneficial to organizations, not just for the people engaging in the program, but it's beneficial for them as well to show their supply chain, their customers, their wider world that they're actually doing this stuff and they're taking it seriously. So the branding is very important, and we'll come back to that. The second thing is about making sure you tell people why it's important. So why is the business doing this in the first place? What's the opportunity? Now, a business will invest in corporate learning for one of two reasons. One will be because it wants to control its risk. So it wants people to behave in a way that will keep the business safer, or will keep the business more efficient, or keep it on the right side of the law, or whatever it might be. Or the other reason is they want to realize opportunity. So they want to go and buy something, or merge with something, or grow exponentially through a new product, or do whatever it is they want to do, and they need better equipped high potential people to help drive that in their organization. So you've got to tell people why you're doing it. That's really important. And then the third thing, again, which with the best intentions is often missed, is about making it very clear at the beginning of the process that what you're investing in is 50% for the benefit of the employer and 50% for the benefit of the employee. And the idea there is to try and create something that becomes a partnership that marries that high potential resource, that entity that you're investing in to get better outcomes from, to the job, to the career, and to want to take this forward within the current role that they're in. There's no point in investing in a corporate learning program that's going to see a bunch of people go and take that qualification and then go and get another job. This has got to be an exercise in bringing key people and the organization together. And then the other kind of element, Craig, that jumps out of this, which I think is often, not overlooked, but maybe forgotten about a few months in, is about the whole comms around it. You've got to sustain communication so that it doesn't feel like it's just an initiative. It's something that will be here today and gone tomorrow. By sustaining that communication over the full length of the program and beyond, you then end up with an opportunity to get other people in the business in a frame of mind that they want to be part of it. And then you get that succession planning within the program as well. And what that does in part, along with some other very carefully tailored and crafted events and communication, is it makes the program aspirational. And if someone doesn't get on it on year one, that's okay. Make sure that they feel compelled to get it on year two. And that again will drive them forward. And then finally, the other thing about continually selling in the benefits of engaging in this stuff is, when a cohort on a particular program does finish, make a real song and dance about the graduation, and make sure that they graduate rather than just get given a certificate in an envelope. Make that little bit of extra effort, get them to do little podcasts to share their experience with the business, take them out to dinner, do the kind of things that you would do if someone was graduating from something perhaps more academic. But these little things make a massive difference when it comes to getting people to get the what's in it for me factor, and to want to come and engage in a program like the ones we're going to describe today.
Okay, well, no, I mean that's obviously really interesting, hopefully for everyone as well. And you've given a really interesting insight to the kind of the end-to-end approach there. But obviously, what's key is not just having a clear reason and an objective to develop a program like this for high potential people. But the key to the door there, obviously, into success is how you get the people motivated and engaged with that program from the outset, I think, isn't it? To really get that buy-in from day one, which then can obviously have lasting effects throughout it. You don't have that at the start, you'll really struggle.
A senior trainer once said to me that if they've got 2 days with a group of high potential people, spending half a day of that 2 days is 25% of that time to get that person one round as to why they're there. That's a huge efficiency failing. And so getting this stuff sold in at the front end becomes much, much more important, so that when you do invest that person's valuable time and your own time and money in making that program happen, that person is motivated from the moment they walk in the door. And I think that was something certainly that stayed with me when we began this approach back in the early 2000s.
Excellent.
Any thoughts or questions before we move on as to that particular point?
I think from my perspective, guys, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later as well. When you're doing a program like this, you're right, Mark, you need to sell it. You need to get people to understand the benefits of it. But that also should link to what your talent management processes are and your performance management processes are internally. And that really sells it to people. If people know they're on a journey to a new job, or they're trying to move up into a managerial position, and they know this is part of the journey of their learning, that really sells it. People, if you're just putting people on a program and not explaining to them what they're getting out the back end of it and how that's going to benefit them, or what the company sees them doing in the future, that's when I found anyway in the past, that's where I find the engagement doesn't happen.
Yeah, I would agree completely. Absolutely.
Yeah, great stuff.
Good. Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Great. Well, I'm going to fire one back at you now, Craig, and we'll discuss this kind of second point. We'll share these slides on the back end of the event, so don't worry, you don't need to write anything down. We'll share these summaries as we go. So the second kind of question then, Craig, and this is aimed in your direction because of your role in our business and your experience both as a deliverer and a developer, where we get into that whole world of what denotes a bespoke program or a custom learning program. So people talk a lot about making things bespoke or making things custom. It's funny, on the other side of our world, configuration over customization is hugely advantageous when it comes to building out software tools. But to make these learning programs custom and to make them fit for purpose for the environment they're going to go into, what are the kind of key elements that need to be bespoke in order to make a program fit for purpose for a specific organization?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think anyone on this call who is engaged and works in the world of training and learning and development and people development generally, I think we all know that training that's just a sort of sheep dip, get them in, get them out, get a certificate at the end of the day is really not an effective approach. In fact, there's probably very, very little forms of training and development out there where that approach these days really does work. There always needs to be consistency between modules and programs, but I think the key words are actually in the questions there around how we bespoke it, customize it, and tailor it. And there's actually two elements that I'll kind of touch on here. I'll try not to take too long. I could probably speak all day on this sort of thing, and I won't. And I'll try and condense it into just a minute or two. I think there's actually responsibilities to both, the organisation and the individual as well, and in terms of what they can actually bring to the table here. So I'll touch on 4 or 5 points perhaps that I think will kind of bring this to life. And the first two I'm going to say are kind of hand in hand, and that would be relevance and context. I think, again, coming back to the core point of your question there, any training or learning programs or learning interventions, particularly when we're trying to motivate high potential people and make the learning really aligned with the business, this is really, really crucial. On the relevance point, again, coming back to one or two of the points that you mentioned in your initial piece, Mark, was about the fact that, as individuals, as delegates on a particular cohort, on a learning program, or as Dan mentioned, a journey, we've really got to see where we fit within that. Why am I actually on this? Am I just on this for the sake of it, or is this really actually going to benefit me in my role today, but also in my role going forward, within the organization? Am I actually selected for this training because it means something to me? And I think that's a motivator for people, but it's really important in terms of how we develop content around the program as well. So the relevance to the individual, I think, is key. And again, that's formed part of the communication of the whole thing. But also the context that can be brought from the organization in terms of what is actually going to be covered within the program or within that particular journey. Again, what are the very specific and what are the very real organizational challenges, scenarios, and data that can actually deliver meaningful learning? So what do exercises need to look at? What does content look at? We're not taking, let's say, for example, your program was about, general leadership development to develop our skills in that area. Yeah, there's loads and loads of content online that we could look at and we could use or beg, borrow, or steal, but that's not always contextually relevant to the organization. So how specific we can actually make it and how relevant we can make it, again, to that person's role at the time is really, really important. And I've touched on that point around real data. Again, I think in our experience and really effective management programs that we've seen with that real data really gets to the heart of what the business is all about, looking at data around competitors, the current market, the future of the market, business financials, for example, things that might actually be, on one hand, quite uncomfortable for people to talk about, on the other hand, can make that really, really relevant. I think those 2 or 3 points are really key. Just a couple of other things I think from a general perspective as well. Commitment from the organization. it's very, very easy, and we'll talk about launching these things a little bit later on, but it's very, very easy to get commitment early. But do we sustain that commitment throughout the program right to the very end to celebrate success, as you mentioned, really key. So whether that's from key leadership positions, senior management, getting that end-to-end buy-in and commitment is really, really important. We'll touch on recruitment as well a little bit later on, I think, but certainly getting the right people onto the right programs and making that program feel in some ways a little bit prestigious. Again, given the audience that we're looking at here, I think it's another real winner and a real buy-in to the program. And the final point I'll mention, which I think is really important as well, is actually how closely you can align the theory versus the practical elements of it. I really don't like seeing training where the theory can look great, but how do I actually use this? How do I use these skills or this learning or these techniques actually tomorrow in the workplace? How is this actually going to benefit me? So the aligning of how we explore scenarios, challenges, and learning through aligning the theory that we're talking about with the actual practical element is really, really key. And often that's within the facilitation as well, that you can kind of unlock that door as well. So I could go on and on about that. I won't, obviously. But I think those kind of 4 or 5 points, Mark, hopefully kind of answers that question. And again, if there's anybody in the room that disagrees with what I've said or would like to add to that, then please feel free.
I suppose my obvious question would be, you know, how easy is it sometimes to unlock that content, whether it be scenario based or company data based, that enables that program to be as contextual as it needs to be. You know, I mean, we've got experience, obviously, of working with many organizations over a long time. And I guess you kind of get a feeling quite early in the process for those that are really going to be quite open in what they're prepared to share.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was going to say when you mentioned that. I think is the fact that if you are going to invest and take the time to develop a program like this, and as kind of Dan mentioned as well, aligning that with other objectives within the organization in terms of the other learning programs, talent management as a whole, then you do need that buy-in at a high level. There's no getting away from that. And if you struggle to get that early, then the overall journey of the program may struggle as well. So I think sorting out these initial potential sticking points is obviously going to lead you to success at the end of the day.
Brilliant.
So, and again, yeah, great. That's a wee summary there of some of the sort of key points I think that I've hopefully touched on there in some detail. Okay,
brilliant.
Right. Well, let's move swiftly on, and I'll try and fire something back at you as well, which again is another kind of key point. But whilst it's not just all about getting the recruitment right and kind of selling the benefits of the program and how we actually go about it, but that buy-in that we've touched on a little bit is obviously really key, and probably should spend a minute or two exploring that. So how are we going to get absolute 100% buy-in then from all delegates, all people involved and selected, to actually attend a program like this with the commitment that's involved in it? Because this is not just a couple of days here and there. This is you could be talking about something fairly requiring quite a lot of commitment. How do you genuinely get people's buy-in to this from start to finish?
It's a great question, and I'm going to be a little bit transparent and honest here, because the answer that I'm going to try and give just now wasn't born out of some inspirational moment where this suddenly arrived as a crystal clear kind of strategy that we needed to go and pursue. I've been with the business personally for about 20 years, which I can't believe that, it feels like 5 minutes. But about 11 of those years were spent going along to various conference centres around the UK and around the world, opening training courses, and time again, you would meet delegates on there who were supercharged and came on and really wanted to get stuck in, and you'd come in and you'd find others that were terrified to be there or apprehensive about an element of it or didn't understand why they'd been sent on there. So bad in one case that somebody turned up on the wrong training course once and wasn't identified until lunchtime. Absolutely incredible that could have happened, and it happened in an environment, you know, that's a relatively mature L&D environment. That was the danger of public courses, but the fundamentals of this stuff is it's a combination of inspiration and perspiration. I think my my overwhelming view is that you have to launch a program properly, way ahead of anyone getting in the classroom or the virtual classroom environment and actually participating. And this is for a really simple reason, and that is that L&D that's a surprise, like anything else, is rarely welcomed. You know, when the natural human reaction to being told you're going on something which is going to be developmental is, why am I not doing something right, or am I creating the wrong impression? Am I doing something wrong? Am I struggling in my role? Where of course, developing high potential people in particular is quite the opposite. It's about unlocking that last bit of potential in them to enable them to go and spread those wings even wider. So the only way you can do that is to structure a proper launch, and to do that launch with the sole intention of putting delegates at ease and allowing them the opportunity to become comfortable with what they're going to do. And that goes back to that introductory stuff. Why does this program exist? How important they are to the business. Make sure they know that in the launch process. Let them explore the delivery styles that are going to be covered off on a program like this. Let them get comfortable that when they come in, that they're going to be doing things which they're going to be not entirely comfortable with, because that probably isn't the best way to learn, but will be done in such a way that will bring them all on together as a group and not necessarily expose one individual for not being quite as strong as something as someone else. You need to go over the content. You need to tell them what they're going to be doing. But the fundamental thing I think about getting this stuff right is you then need to cover off unequivocally on everyone's expectations. And by everyone's expectations, I mean the three groups of people that are involved in any corporate learning program. They are the delegates themselves, the students. They are, of course, the subject matter. They are fundamentally important to everything. Secondly, the employer. The employer is crucial to this process as well, because what an employer will get from engaging a group in a process like this is they're going to get feedback, and you've got to be damn sure that they're ready to respond to that feedback and to support that feedback as it comes into the business. And then there's also an expectation on those that are delivering the program. Now, in our world, as you know, Craig, 50% of the time that's us, but sometimes we're preparing others to go and deliver programs themselves. I know we've got McDermott on the call just now, and they've got a fantastic record of delivering corporate learning programs themselves. So it's a mix of those three groups, but you need to end up with a cast iron commitment from all three parties to do what's needed to deliver what the program is expected to deliver. That's the delegates, the deliverers, and the business. And what we tend to want to do in these processes is capture all of that in the launch event, create what we call, but you can call it something different, but we call it a learning contract, which is designed to just create that little bit of extra accountability. It enables people to say, right, this is what we've agreed we're going to do, and we're going to actually check ourselves against that. We produce this thing and we put it on the wall, and we remember it, and we make sure that no one is missing out any of the commitment that they've made. Because when time is precious and when you're getting buy-in for a program like this, all of the modules themselves need to be spent doing proactive and constructive learning, and none of that stuff around getting people to buy into what's there. Now, sometimes it's a little bit controversial. What happens in a process like that is maybe someone really doesn't think they're ready to go through it, or doesn't think they're the right person. They can have an appropriate conversation with someone in their talent management team in the business, and they can maybe be replaced by someone else, or they can get given a little bit of coaching and go back on and actually find that it was something they will benefit from after all. So again, none of the stuff that we've spoken about in the last 5 minutes or so is quantum physics. Far from it. It's just making sure that you get that rigor in place so that people turn up prepared and fully eyes wide open around what they're going to go and do and why.
Okay, I mean, I think that's fair enough, and the idea of I think having a formal launch day or launch process or whatever that looks like, behind the, to kick things off is obviously great, and I think for me, one of the potential barriers or challenges that you can face with something like this is an individual's own perception of what's going to happen and what they're going to be involved in. But we know that everyone's different from a perspective of learning. Everyone has their own learning styles and preferences, and kind of rate to that as well. Is there scope from a delivery perspective, or certainly within the launch as well, to cover some of those elements off, to put some of those fears to bed as well, do we think?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think you have to allow a little bit of scope for exactly that. You know, I mean, we find, as you know, Craig, in our world that, you know, most people that we come into contact with tend to like to be quite tactile in terms of their approach to learning. They tend to like to get their sleeves rolled up and do things in groups and to explore the kind of tools and methodologies and processes that they're going to use. And I think we have to we have to allow a little bit of time for that exploration and a launch process to happen, so that again you've kind of conquered any fears around that before anyone it comes in and actually engages.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
sounds good. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments around that before we move on? Nope, all good.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Okay. Next question again that we're gonna cover off, and this one I suppose has become even more prevalent in the world that we now occupy, which is I guess we're getting towards calling it post-pandemic. We can't quite, because we're still very much living with COVID, but certainly some of the restrictions now that prevented us being in the classroom are now being eased. In fact, to the classroom to my right, we've got a live class going on just now, which is brilliant. But this whole kind of evolving debate around time and commitment in terms of how long you need to be in a classroom or a virtual classroom in order to achieve something which is tangible and worthwhile in a kind of corporate learning environment. How long is too long when it comes to course frequency, and what's that balance like when it's just right? And I guess, Craig, I'll just add to that question and say you had to, and we'll use our CTO's favorite word, you had to pivot the business 180 degrees extremely quickly when the pandemic struck, to go from masses of classroom delivery to lots and lots of virtual delivery. So you obviously didn't know the answer you're going to give straight away. So maybe you could share a little bit of that experience as you kind of, you know, explore this point in a bit more detail.
Yeah, no, definitely. That was an experience, as I'm sure there's a few people that have had similar experiences as well that are probably on this call and still are, because it's an ever changing process actually. Yeah, I mean, again, is there a definite right answer here? You know, probably not. You know, I think there's a little bit of flexibility, you know, involved in this as well. And I think one of the things, you know, you touched on, of course, the kind of what we've learned from the pandemic and having to be flexible now with learning and really making engaging learning online like this, for example, being able to host things like this. There's real benefits that have come out from that, I suppose, but with that comes a set of challenges as well. And there's always going to be arguments and debate around what should only ever be done in the classroom physically, or what can be done online. And I think, you know, first and foremost, to kick this off, I'm genuinely a firm believer that most learning can be done effectively online if it's organised and delivered in the right way with the right tools. And I think that's just something that we should all, and I think as well, kind of going forward, generally in the world of learning and development, I think we know that having to do things virtually online, whether that's people doing their own self-directed learning, or whether that's people being led by a trainer or a facilitator or some form of expert, is fine. And I think we just have to kind of accept that that is the new norm going forward. However, there are obvious benefits to being in a classroom, being in a more physical workshop environment. As you say, we're now blending ourselves back into the classroom with some things, which is great. And again, we've got to think about the kind of the people that are within that as well. So just probably a couple of things I would probably touch on. I think we have to be realistic and take a sensible balance to this as well. If I take it from a fairly traditional concept of how we run this, because if we think about the learning content, we can then develop solutions around that about delivery. Delivery will often take care of itself if we get the actual structure and the content right. I think generally speaking, of course, the full content or the full delivery of a program will vary depending on the program and what it is that you're actually looking at. Typically, if we're looking at individual modules around learning, then I think typically no more than 2 days at a time is probably good practice from our experience. I'm not sure, depending on the content, you know, that we need to go longer than that, or certainly shorter than that, potentially. But I think 2 days tends to be a bit of a sweet spot from a kind of workshop environment. We then need to think about what does that then look like in the context of the bigger picture, the bigger you know, the wider rollout. So if, for example, you're developing a modularized program of learning, which is becoming more and more popular and effective these days, then it should be thinking about scheduling and how you structure that. So doing one every week or one every other day, to try and condense that is not going to be very effective, because you will just really, for want of a better word, completely bamboozle people with the content and the information. But equally, if you leave it too long and you've got like months and months between modules or different learning stages, then you're going to get skill fade and learning fade, and certainly lose a little bit of momentum. So I think from our experience of delivering programs, like this, I think that sort of 3 to 5 week window per module of learning, whether that's around about 2 days, face-to-face or online, largely I think can be effective depending on how it's actually delivered. But that sort of 2-day intervention versus a fairly structured 3 to 5 week window, I think works well and tackles a lot of the issues around momentum and skill fade and learning fade that we've touched on. The other benefits to having a little bit of time, 2, 3, 4 weeks between the modules, is that it actually allows people to take the learning, to let it sink in, to reflect on it. I mean, reflection is such an underrated skill within learning generally, being able to self-reflect. There's lots of models with that as well, to say, well, what does this mean to me? How do I apply this in the workplace for added benefit for me and the organization? So it allows that soak period, but it also allows for a little bit of practice as well. And really it takes into account that the ever-growing concept that self-directed learning, where learners must take ownership to develop learning, to source learning in the workplace at a point that works for them, to really get the benefit of the learning. That can all come from a structured format, but they must take a little bit of responsibility. And I think any program like this, particularly with high performers who are naturally going to be busy just by the nature of who these people are in the business, they will be busy. Then we've got to think about the program, I think, around those parameters, and allow for a little bit of structure and formal learning, but also allow for a little bit of soak time, self-reflection, and indeed their own responsibility, and that kind of self-directed piece in the learning, I think, is really, really key. If you are going to go down the route of virtual, for my final point, do not expect people to sit on a Teams call all day. It's different in a classroom environment to sit for 7, 8, 9 hours with breaks and learn like that in a workshop environment. If you're doing it online, sitting on your own, 2 to 3 hours maximum, really with a reasonable break, even in a single day, that's probably enough. It's what we've learned. And coming back to your initial point about our experience of having to really change the business in the last 24 months or so, that's been a steep learning curve for us, I think, is the balance of online sessions. Too little, you're not going to land anything that's relevant. Too long, people will switch off. 2 to 3 hours in the virtual world, I think, anyway, is certainly the sweet spot. So I've covered quite a lot there. I've sort of spoken about the kind of end-to-end process. I've spoken about the individual parts to it, but I think you've got to come up with a structure that works for the people that are involved. But there should be cognizance of a little bit of self-responsibility around learning as well. And any effective program for high performers should really consider that, I think. So I'll probably try and leave that there with sort of 5 or 6 key points, and hopefully, Mark, that kind of covers sort of the key points there.
Yeah, it does. That's brilliant. I mean, a couple I was just reflecting on there, the retention piece, with high performers in particular, by getting that front end bit right, you're motivating them in a virtual sense to do what's needed in terms of self-reflection and self-learning when you're in between sessions. But as you've correctly said, Craig, if you leave the gap between the modules too long, that the retention thing becomes a little bit more difficult, as we found when you run little 20-30 minute reflection sessions at the start of the next modules to find out just exactly what people have retained and what they've done with it. Mm-hmm. But again, it's that whole piece, isn't it, about motivating people to do what's important outside the classroom as well as what's important in it, particularly if it's a virtual environment.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so we'll crack on into the next couple. I think you're gonna ask me about this one.
Yeah, I'm going to pose this one, Mark, and I won't go on too long. I'll just pose you the question, as you say, in the interest of time, and quite a simple one as well. We've spoken about learning and delivery then, in terms of a general structure and a time. But within those learning interventions, how do we go about them to really make them effective?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an easy question to answer. There's a number of different ways you can structure this. This is our way, and you're welcome to use it and share it, and that's absolutely fine. I've used that phrase quantum physics already on the call today. This is exactly what this isn't. But we've found that typically by sticking to it, regardless of the subject matter or content, we tend to point the direction of the arrow the right way in terms of where the topic within the module is actually left. And we've got this approach called listen, do, discuss, action, which again is exactly what it says on the tin. So think very Ronseal here in the kind of intention of the methodology. But essentially, when we're tackling a topic, so for example, in the world of supervisory management, we might be tackling the topic of authority or difficult conversations or motivating or coaching or whatever it might be. What we will always start with is some trainer-led insight into A, why the topic's important, and then B, what good looks like, what bad looks like, and what it looks like when you just really don't know what the outcome's been. Because you have to understand the kind of good, the bad, and the ugly in order to get your head around why that topic is so important. So there's always some instructor-led context, and we've seen some great instructor-led context in-house programs that we don't deliver as well, because the added advantage of being part of the business that you're in when you're doing this stuff is that you can create even greater context around that kind of orientation piece at the front end. And then going back to that second point around the fact that most people we come into contact with tend to enjoy kind of tactile learning. We do a bunch of stuff, and I love that word stuff because it covers a whole range of topics and activities and scenarios and things like that. But the doing is generally done in groups so that individuals don't feel particularly exposed, but you're giving them tools, you're giving them knowledge, you're giving them processes, and you're actually asking them to go and use them to become A, aware of how to do something, but B, how to become confident in doing it so that classroom divide is as small as it can be when they actually step out into a live environment. And then that arrow really begins to point after that. The third element is let's have a facilitated discussion about what you've just done and learned means in the context of your own job. So where and how do you have opportunities to apply what you've just learned? Where and how do you have challenges that might require a little bit of further discussion? And then finally, let's commit to at least one thing for every topic that we cover within a module that we're either going to do better or do differently in order to achieve a better outcome for that particular topic. So from the kind of orientation piece at the front end through to the what will I do at the back end, listen, do, discuss, action, usually gets the module topic to where it needs to be. And it's simple to follow. It's written into your documentation, so it's something that when you've done it once, you can repeat again and again. To quote Dr. Doug in our business, learn once, repeat correctly. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with this particular methodology here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you say, this is something that we've had in the business for a long time for a reason, because it works. You know, we deliver training and learning in loads of different disciplines and areas to different types of people in different organizations, and we pretty much adopt this approach across the board. And it also works virtually as well. You just have to change your thinking around that a little bit. So, as you say, it's simple, effective, and it works. And why not use it?
Brilliant, thanks. I am conscious that we've been yapping a lot, Craig, and that we're needing to get through this. So
worse than me, but yeah, absolutely.
We've got two more short questions, and then we're going to take you through the actual process itself briefly, and we're going to talk to Daniel, which is probably the most important part of this process. So this question is obviously important to everyone on the call. If you do make an investment in L&D in this space, how can you test the effectiveness? That's a simple but fundamental question that we need to address.
Yeah, and it's a question that we get asked quite a lot as well. If we are asked to go in and deliver a learning program, no matter how big it is or what level it's at, you know, how does a company actually know it's been worthwhile? How do we know it's been beneficial, you know, to our people and actually been effective? And I suppose there's two things in there. It's some of the traditional models around feedback and measurement, around setting some objectives and perhaps some KPIs to ensure that actually we are meeting these things. And again, every organization really has to take responsibility for that. I think the general concept is obviously important that we do think about that. So I'm going to start off with a really simple one, which is actually, and again, there's of course different models and theories out there that will look at capturing feedback and measuring effectiveness, different stages, and why not? Because they're fit for purpose to look at. But I think generally speaking, if we engage with people, learners on these programs genuinely, to seek feedback, to seek and gain insight into what they've done, how they've used that. So not just doing it, did we enjoy the workshop or the training from a kind of measurement perspective, but actually how are people using it 6 months later or a year later in the workplace genuinely? How much of that knowledge and skills have we retained? How much of it's actually been lost? Is there something then at the back of that can be done from an actual learning delivery point of view that can actually change that or improve that? Coming back to my point earlier on about the structure of it and the self-directed piece and the responsibility, I think plays a big part in that. And if people are motivated and they see the benefit in it, then they will use it. And I think that's what's really, really important. In terms of the actual learning itself, in terms of some of the content, make it, develop or build something into the program that's actually a real challenge, an actual scenario. For example, if you build something in where at the end of it, there's got to be an actual outcome, a tangible outcome that groups have perhaps worked on, developed, and that challenge would be business related, that the organisation might face. It might be a market related issue. It might be through with a competitor. It might be because the organisation wants to grow or expand into a different area. If you give the programme a genuine objective that can actually be met, and there's a clear outcome from that, so it's not just generic learning or learning to no outcome, but learning, building toward a goal through a real challenge or opportunity, then again, that's going to really allow you to measure the effectiveness of the program as well. And you've already touched on, Mark, my final point would have been around actually using some of the kind of legacy brand. I know you mentioned before about branding, really giving a little bit of weight and prestige to programs like this as well. If you get that in place right, and I know Dan mentioned it as well, and we'll hopefully touch on just shortly, then that really helps sustain the program beyond any one singular intervention. So I've tried to capture 2 or 3 kind of key points in there as best I can, but get that, really.
Yeah, that's great, and I appreciate you talking at breakneck speed there, because what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the format slightly. But there's a process that we are going to talk about, or we're going to give you access to, which we'll show you briefly, but we're not going to have time probably to cover off because of our own fault, because we've spoken too much. But I want to get Daniel involved as quickly as we can. But there's one more point that Craig just touched on that I think we would like to cover.
Yeah.
Just in terms of helping you think about some of the things that you can look for as an outcome from a high potential program. And again, maybe on a later date, we can talk about how you actually capture this stuff from a kind of measurement and systems perspective. But Craig, I'll just go straight in and cover this off, just given the time. But ROI is fundamental to this. If you buy a piece of software or buy something that helps you with projects or helps you with finance, you expect to be able to define an ROI very quickly. And we believe that the same should be the case for corporate learning and development. And 5 things I would just briefly touch on that you can align KPIs to, which are important. Firstly, if you're investing in learning for these types of characters in your organization, you want to retain them. You want to take them and you want to make them 100% bought into having their career and realizing their potential within your organization. So low turnover in key positions, better retention is that first KPI. The second one is around career progression. There is no point, as Daniel said in his opening comment, in not linking this to the wider talent management piece within your business. You should expect those individuals, upon graduating and upon getting to know each other the way that they have, to be able to progress together and actually to move through the organization as they intend. And that might not necessarily be in a management capacity. It could be in a technical capacity, or it could be in a blended capacity, but you should look for that progression. The third thing, and this is something which talent management needs to align to, is your organization's profitability. By being better at making project decisions, by making commercial decisions more effectively, by being better at building and managing teams, you should make less mistakes. You should encourage better margin on projects. You should be more efficient in how you deploy your work, and that should affect your profitability. The fourth one, which is perhaps more difficult to quantify, but again, you can look at that stability piece, is around team dynamics, making sure that now that you've got a more holistic awareness among the selected group for a program like this about the pressures and the roles and responsibilities that each other has, you should have a much better cross-function understanding of teams and how teams perform. And again, by carefully selecting, as Craig said earlier, in that recruitment process, you can bring the right people together to learn together, to then go and take that and become closer colleagues in real life. And then the programs that we're talking about today, and I'm not sure we're going to have time to go through the detail of that, also encourage better understanding of value in markets and competitors and all that kind of stuff. So it should encourage more sales and better account management, because the external communication that's fed into your customers and your potential customers should then get better and then get stronger. And again, there are KPIs you can build in that look at that side of things as well. Okay, so that's gonna where we'll bring the kind of discussion to a little bit of a close.
Yeah.
We'll share all this with you at the end. If you can bear with us maybe five minutes longer than intended, would like now to look at a kind of real example that Daniel and Stork should be incredibly proud of. What I will just say is we've got a process, given that we're a process organization, for building content like this, and we'd like to share that process with you. So again, we've got your details. We'll make sure that we send the process out for you to look at. But it's a multi-step process which we're going to walk you through. I'm not going to do it now just purely because it would use up all the time we've got left, but I will make sure we share this with an appropriate explanation of how it works. But essentially, it's got the we bring and you bring on the left and the right hand sides, and it will walk you through the types of things that we feel make a corporate learning program stand out from a standard training intervention. Okay, so we will give you this and we'll give you some explanation of it as well. We might actually, Craig, record a short video actually to go with it. That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, and we can send that out along with the same link to the
absolutely,
webinar. Actually,
absolutely. Yeah. But there's a process here that ensures that learn once, repeat correctly methodology is able to be followed. So I have talked far too much. We're gonna kind of MC you through this, Daniel. But if you wouldn't mind coming in now and just talking about the way in which you look after your high potential talent development within Stork. And again, we would just like to kick off with the importance you place on identity and structure in terms of how you engage people in what it is you're doing.
Thanks, Mark. So I think for me, when we started this journey probably back in 2017, probably, and I think most people that are on here, their companies probably have leadership programs, and they'll have sort of development pathways for people in varying areas across their business. But the gap that we found was more around people starting a business as a graduate or an entry-level position, or they come into a business already with experience and they work through that technical knowledge and learning. But when they want to make that jump to being a manager, there's a lot more that you need to know. You need to be a sort of more well-rounded business individual. You need to know about budgets and finance, and you need to know about how to manage people. You need to know about sales and business development. But most leadership programs don't cover those practical topics. Most leadership programs cover your leadership behaviors. How do you behave? How should you behave in a certain leadership level within an organization? And we found we needed a program that fitted that gap, that allowed our individuals to learn about the practical elements of being a manager. Most of the individuals that we would put on it would be linked to our talent management processes. So we're putting people on that we know are high potential, high performers that we want to develop and want to be the leaders of the future. And we're not necessarily putting people on it that aren't necessarily engaged in that pathway. If somebody wants to be a technical expert, then maybe this is not the program for you if you don't want to be a manager. So we developed this management development program along with STC at the time. Obviously we come up with this branding of Diamond, which ultimately started as branding for the program itself and the 4 modules, but ultimately actually became our whole sort of L&D framework, and looking at all the different elements that we have across the business.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Daniel. Thank you. And I guess we spoke a little bit about recruitment, and trying to create that mini business within a cohort. But you guys certainly from the launch experiences I was involved in, you took that very seriously, and literally you've got a process here for how you make sure you get that cross-functional learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, you both talked about the buy-in, and the buy-in for us was massively important. It wasn't just about the buy-in from the individuals attending the program and them understanding about what that means for them and their future, but also the buy-in from the leaders of the organisation. And I think when you've been to most of the launch events, Mark, there's always been one or two of our directors there to launch it with you, to discuss why we're launching this program, why it's important for Stork. And that was always an important factor for us, so that the individuals on the program understood that this wasn't just something random that we were putting people on, that the directors of the business also took it very seriously and understood the benefits of it as well.
And I think that helps, certainly, having that focus, because like many energy businesses and engineering and construction businesses in the energy space, we've kind of been in a perpetual state of change for as long as we can practically remember.
Yeah.
And so the business is always having to grow and change and adapt. And of course, everything changes in organizations so quickly these days, from what they do, the scope of what they do, even sometimes their ownership structures. And so having that kind of consistency and that confidence in the senior management team within the business supporting a cohort, I guess, is even more important than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most organizations in oil and gas at this point in time, over the past sort of 4 or 5 years, have become a lot leaner, and that makes your talent a lot more important, and making sure that you are developing internal succession pipelines and you are preparing people for roles for the future, as well as the roles that they're currently in. And this program plays a vital role in that.
Brilliant. That's great. You're in that picture, Daniel. I can see you.
Somewhere, yeah, somewhere.
Shall we talk about your kind of experience of having an event like this where everyone gets a chance to share their hopes and fears and aspirations, and how that works in a group environment where you get so many different individuals?
Yeah, I think our program, obviously, it's a variety of people from across the business, and the launch for us is very important, and the sort of learning contract is important. We want people to be open and honest. We want people to share their fears, whether that's fears about the program or fears about and their current job challenges that they're facing, but also people to share their successes and their strengths. And ultimately, I think what we share in most of these programs is that we're all one team, and everybody is a peer of each other, and we should be able to help support and challenge each other. And when I say challenge, I don't necessarily mean negatively, but positively challenge, constructively challenge people about how they do things. And that's in order to help create efficiencies and to help create best practice across the business as well. And these sessions, creating that learning contract, is really, really good. And then you obviously we have that on the wall in each module that we do, so that when we're going through it, people are reminded about what we agreed at the start, what we should be doing, being open and honest, sharing experiences, helping each other out, and working together. And it really does sort of just set the scene every time you sit in to start one of the modules.
Very good. Yeah. It's fantastic. I guess you should briefly touch on your program. These things can be whatever they need to be, but you've opted for 4 core modules, and obviously one that I suppose is your payback, where you then go and address an opportunity or challenge that's actually at your doorstep on the time of the program.
Yeah, and these modules for us are key, because you can see everybody up until a certain point in their career is very focused on the niche that they support. So whether that's something technical or a support function, they're very much focused in that area. And these modules allow them to explore and understand how we do things as a business. And we try to make it more Stork focused. So we're using for the business and money module, for example, we're using Stork specific figures. We're looking at the Stork profit and loss accounts. We're not just looking at some random company X has made £20 million profit this year and looking at all the figures. We're actually saying, right, this is Stork's actual accounts. This is how much we've made, and people are actually getting a reality. And what was good about all of them, we tried to do that for every module, and sort of Storkify it a little bit with Stork content. And what that really does for me is create those light bulb moments for people. And the business and the money one is probably the one where that probably happens the most, because people start to make that connection of, okay, I understand why the businesses then made these decisions, because I now understand how profit and loss accounts and balance sheets work and why certain decisions in the business were made, and people start to make those links. And that for me is one of the biggest benefits of the program, is people start to link outcomes with the knowledge, and that's always been one of the best benefits.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, I'm getting more and more controversial in my older age, but I believe that corporate learning, by definition, if it's commercial corporate learning, and you meet a finance director that isn't prepared to share the appropriate level of financial data with a high potential group in the business, then it isn't truly corporate learning. I think it's that important. How can you influence and have a positive impact on something that you don't fully understand yourself?
Exactly, and we implemented this at a time when the oil and gas industry wasn't in a rosy situation. We'd just been through 2015 downturn, and things weren't sort of making massive profits. And what it allowed us to do was people to understand the reality, and people not to just understand company X has made £200 million profit this year. Fantastic. It actually got people to learn about the reality, which is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And the challenge itself, I mean, I think you've done 4 now over the 4 years. It's been a really interesting blend, but I guess it's a great opportunity for your panel to come back and see what that cohort's achieved.
Yeah, again, it's that director buy-in. The director set the challenge, and I'll be honest, we didn't get it right. Maybe the first year we did it, I think we made a challenge that was probably too broad, and we didn't really necessarily get the benefits out of it that we thought. But that's also part of the learning process, and we've had different challenges, and some of the challenges have been very, very niche. But it's the directors setting the challenge for the participants, and then they get to present back to the directors in their small groups with what they've found, and it's about giving something practical back, and letting the people that you think are high potential, high performance that you want to develop, allow them to give something tangible back on what they're learning to the business as well. And it's always been, if nothing else, it's always been a very good discussion and a very good learning session for everybody, including the senior management in the business.
That's great. That's brilliant. And the format we probably don't need to cover off again. I think I covered that previously, but you do use that approach, which gets the arrow pointed to an outcome, I suppose, for every module, and it just creates, I suppose, a little bit more accountability as well as topics are explored.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we designed this with SEC Global back in 2017, one of the things that I wanted to make sure was that it was practical based, and it wasn't sitting down death by PowerPoint for 2 days at a time. We wanted it to be practical, and obviously you at that time presented this model that you work with, and that really sort of sat well with us in terms of, okay, learn a wee bit, let's do something, let's discuss it, okay, what were everybody's experiences, and then let's create some actions out the back of it. And that really works well for us, especially on these when we're talking about management development, and it's the more practical elements of being a manager rather than sort of the behavioural aspects of leadership.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. We spoke about the challenge, obviously, itself, but there you go. That was your one, Luke.
Yeah, I'm sitting there again. I make a habit of appearing in photos, apparently.
I mean, I suppose one of the comments about these things is at the end, the kind of payback session where you get to kind of see a live outcome, that it really does depend on what's going on in the business, I suppose, at any given time, doesn't it? I mean, we've had ones where, you know, a company that had been on a harbour for 100 years have been told they've got to leave and they've got to go and find a new office. We've had ones that have acquired new divisions or moved to a new geographical location or decided to go and invest some R&D money in a new tool. It can be any number of things. It just really does depend on what's going on at that time.
Exactly, and that's always an interesting conversation, the challenge with the senior management. And my advice there would be for anybody that wants to do it is to try not to make it too broad, because like I say, the first year we did it, we made a challenge that was very broad, and I think it just made it challenging for the teams, because the directors were expecting one outcome and the teams had went down a different angle looking at it, and I think that was maybe a good learning for us as well.
Yeah. No, it is. It's important. It's not developed in minute 1 of the program as well. Take time to formulate it based on experience. And then, of course, that final point about graduation. You were the first group, I think, in 2018, but or 2017 or 2018, I think was the first one. But yeah, you do a very good job of making graduates feel like they've graduated, which I think is very important.
Yeah, it's just about that recognition a little bit, and I think just telling people that they've done well. And again, having that senior management buy-in and get them to present and doing a bit of a photo presentation and those kind of things just make people feel you're not just sort of finishing a course and walking back to your desk. People feel a little bit positive about it and feel like they're getting a little bit of recognition for their efforts as well.
Agreed. And of course, the final kind of piece here as well around longevity. You've been doing this now for 4 years, and I suppose hats off to you, because these things are difficult to sustain, and you've built on that momentum, which has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think these things are key, and I think, like I said at the start, we identified a gap that we need to fulfill. I don't think we did one last year, but I think that was more down to participants than anything. But
it's big pandemic.
Well, there's that as well. But it's something it's very much part of our suite of talent management programs. And yes, we have global corporate leadership programs that we run as well, but they're not practical based. And this is practical based on how to be what the practical elements of being a manager and what does that mean in Stork, rather than just going on a finance for non-finance managers course. Well, actually, okay, let's do a management development program that's more focused on the Stork actual content and theory, and people apply that better rather than going on a generic course and hearing about generic theory, but then it's maybe talked about something or named something different in your actual business. So it's very much definitely part of our suite of talent programs.
Brilliant. Okay, that's brilliant, Daniel, and I'm so sorry that we had to rush that last bit a wee bit. So here are some examples of some of the branded programs that have been out there in the management development space in particular. But I can't see who's still on the call. I'm going to come out of this so I can and stop sharing. Craig, I don't know if you want to just open up the floor for any Q&A for those that can stay on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, happy to. At this stage, I think unfortunately, I think a lot of people have made their apologies, Mark. But there are still 2 or 3 on the call, which is great to see. So it's obviously useful for the purpose of the link, because we'll send the recording out for all anyway. So absolutely, Daniel, thanks. Thanks. That really interesting. That unique experience you've had is obviously key to the whole thing as well. So thank you. But yeah, the floor is open. I got there 12 minutes late, but we got there in the end.
Okay.
If there's any comments or questions, then please feel free. Otherwise, we'll get the link sent out, of course.
Yeah, apologies, folks. Again, that was bad planning, but it was what it was.
That was an awesome call. Absolutely awesome. Awesome information.
Thank you, Brian. That's really good to hear.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. I think it was a great session. I said the whole way through. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Guillermo. Good to hear from you as well. Great to virtually see you again. Great. Okay. Well, we're conscious we've kind of lost 20 odd people, so I can understand why the other diary commitments. But brilliant. Thank you very much, folks. We'll package this up. The kind of magic dust process in the middle. We'll make sure we put some appropriate commentary around that and send it out to you as well. And hopefully you can use that in your own environments too.
Brilliant.
Thank you,
Daniel. We owe you one.
Very
Thanks.
good. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.